Welcome, Minister. Obviously, the impetus, as people have said, for this afternoon's motion has been the tremendous work of the Turn Off the Red Light campaign to end prostitution and combat sex trafficking in Ireland. And I would like to commend the campaign for highlighting the intrinsic link between the demand for prostitution in Ireland and the trafficking of women and girls to meet this demand. The vast majorities of the members of Turn Off the Red Light are civil society groups and NGOs that have direct experience of the devastating effects of prostitution on women, children and men throughout Ireland. These devastating effects are physical, such as sexually transmitted infections, injuries sustained as a result of beatings and rapes, gynecological problems owing to multiple terminations of pregnancy, and many other health conditions relating to prostitution. There are also mental and emotional injuries deeply embedded in the psyche of sex workers and victims of trafficking, which are likely to be carried throughout their lives. My colleagues, Senator Sapone and McNeill, have excellently outlined the views of our group, which I fully support. And therefore, in my intervention, I'm going to focus on the situation for children. Because as devastating as these effects are on adults, the impact is almost unimaginable for children and child victims of trafficking for sexual exploitation. I have researched with interest some of the arguments against criminalising the purchase of sex in Ireland, and I find myself wholly unconvinced by them. One argument contends that criminalising the purchase of sex in an effort to curb prostitution violates a sex worker's right to exercise self-determination over her own body. I must respectfully disagree. It is my belief that when the complex layers of how and why women and men find themselves selling their bodies for sexual gratification of others are peeled away, their paths into prostitution did not start with the simple exercise of their right to self-determination over their bodies. For those that argue that prostitution is an issue of consent, I would ask these people to be mindful that the age identified internationally for entry into prostitution is 14, at which consent cannot be given. I would also like to highlight the situation for young homeless. Focus Ireland, for example, estimates that there's as many as 1,500 young people under the age of 18 who are homeless each year in Ireland. As many as 18 of who are unaccompanied, and 1/4 are under the age of 12. There's inadequate resourcing in this area, and there's insufficient number of places for children in safe sheltered accommodation. And some are said to be forced and turned into prostitution to survive. An increase in substance abuse amongst homeless youths, particularly males, has also seen increased recourse to prostitution, and there is evidence to suggest that boys as young as 13 are involved in prostitution in Dublin City. As for the situation of separated children or unaccompanied minors, these are under 18 years of age who are outside their country of origin and are separated from both of their parents or their previous legal customary primary caregiver. Separated children are an extremely vulnerable group owing to their unaccompanied status. The fact that they may have experienced war and violence and the dangers that they are smuggled or trafficked into Ireland for sexual exploitation. And I know that there has been improvements for the situation for separated children in Ireland under the Ryan Report implementation plan, and also measures have been taken such as DNA identification to tackle false family reunifications. But the instances of children going missing from care are of deep concern. In this very chamber this morning, the Minister for Children and Youth Affairs told us that there are 16 cases of children missing in Ireland still outstanding, 11 for 2010 alone. 11 of those are unaccompanied minors. There is strong anecdotal evidence that a number of these children could have been trafficked into prostitution and other forms of sexual exploitation. The Children's Rights Alliance in September 2011 submitted collated case studies of suspected and confirmed child victims of trafficking in Ireland to the Department of Justice and Equality Anti-Human Trafficking Unit. And just to briefly outline these cases, which for me paint a picture of dreadful exploitation. A 15-year-old Somali rescued from a brothel in 2006, having been trafficked into Ireland. A 16-year-old Nigerian girl who arrived to Ireland as a separated child in 2009 and was enticed out of HSE residential care by a man who later got her involved into prostitution. A 16-year-old girl from Burundi, held captive in a house in County Louth and abused. She was taken from her village in Africa at the age of 12 and introduced into sex slavery in different countries before being trafficked into Ireland for more sexual exploitation. I've also heard dreadful accounts by an NGO, which was subsequently documented, of Eastern European girls as young as 14 being trafficked into Ireland, brutally and systematically raped over a number of days to break them in, and then shipped off to various brothels around Ireland. So it's an intolerable situation, and it is, for me, my motivation of why I fully support the motion being put forward here by the independent group. The sex industry in Ireland, as Senator Sapone has already mentioned, is extremely lucrative. Children continue to be victims of prostitution and trafficking because it's good business for organised criminals and traffickers. After much research into this issue, I firmly believe that legislation is needed. I understand that the Minister says we need wider public debate. And I would love to be standing here saying I'm reassured by what I've heard from both the government side and the Minister's side, but I don't feel reassured. I think we've had a lot of nice words, a lot of good sentiments, but I would like to have been seeing much more detail tonight in what was being put forward before us. I note the 6-month time frame that is given to us. We still have to take a decision as a group whether we're going to move this to a vote. But for me, certainly, we're not going away on this issue, because every day that passes, there's a possibilities of children and women being forced further into sexual exploitation in Ireland. We have to take action. So for me, yes, maybe we need to allow you some time, but for me, it's a very short time, because this is about human beings. It's about people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Mary White.